Would you like me to seduce you?
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
Of all the gin joints in all the towns in all the world, he walks into mine.
Why is the rum always gone?
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
It's a trap!
Every town has an Elm Street. Trust no one, Mr. Miller. Nice night for a walk. Groovy.
Hey guys, welcome to the Celluloid Fiends podcast. I'm your host, Mo. You can follow me at Mitchell C. Long on Twitter and Instagram, and you can read my writing on film and a lot more at cupofmo.com. And as always, I'm joined by my phenomenal co-host.
What's up, everybody? This is Gabriel Orto. If you want to go ahead, go to Facebook, give us a like on Facebook. That'd be fantastic.
Thanks, as always, for listening. We really appreciate the support, and we'd also appreciate it if you went over to the iTunes store and subscribed and rated us and gave us a review. So tonight, we are talking about Bubba Ho-Tep. This movie came out in 2002. It was directed by Don Coscarelli, had a budget of $1 million, and made $1.2 million at the box office. It currently sits at a 79% critic and audience rating on Rotten Tomatoes, which is actually, I think, the first time that I've seen the critic and audience scores exactly even on Rotten Tomatoes. So, what is this movie about? It stars Bruce Campbell as Elvis Presley, now in a nursing home, the Shady Rest Retirement Home in East Texas. And there's a backstory that Elvis switches places with a renowned Elvis impersonator, Sebastian Haff, also played by Bruce Campbell, but a mishap with a propane tank destroyed the only documentation proving that he was the real Elvis. And during his stay at Shady Rest, Elvis befriends Jack, Aussie Davy, who claims to be JFK but died black after the assassination attempt. So the pair begin to notice some strange deaths at the retirement home, and they believe these are caused by a reanimated Egyptian mummy dubbed Bubba Ho-Tep by Elvis. So this was a Gabe pick. Gabe,
Yes, it was.
why did you pick this film?
It's a lot of people would go ahead and review like Evil Dead or something along that lines when it came to Bruce Campbell. But I wanted to pick a Bruce Campbell movie that maybe some people had not seen. And this was a good pick.
I love a lot of the Phantasm movies. I didn't realize it was the same director, though, until afterwards. Because I was like, who directed this? And I looked it up on IMDb when we were sitting in your living room, and it's like, oh shit, this was done by the same guy who did Phantasm. And this was my first time seeing it. And I'd heard a little bit about it. A lot of people had recommended it to me just because they know my movie tastes, and I'm a big Evil Dead fan, and I love Bruce Campbell. But this movie was not what I expected. It was just batshit insane, and it just worked miraculously.
There's a lot of comedy elements to this movie, too. Get a few good laughs in there. It doesn't take itself too seriously at all. It's pretty fun-loving.
It's very fun-loving, and it's hard for me to see anyone except for Bruce Campbell in that role as Elvis.
No, I can't see anybody else doing this role in this movie.
No, it just required his goofy persona and not taking himself too seriously. And his delivery has this kind of faux serious quality to it, which solidified that role.
Exactly.
So how many times have you seen this?
Not that many times. I've probably seen it 3-4 times.
Has your opinion changed from the first time you watched it to the most recent?
Not really. I always really enjoyed this movie. I always think it's a good laugh, and even a good like comedy horror movie. And there's not a ton of those that I truly enjoy. There's not a ton of horror comedies that just are on the top of my list. Like Shaun of the Dead and this are like a couple of the 3 or 4 that I really enjoy.
Yeah, I tend to enjoy horror comedies. Evil Dead 2 is great. I loved Cabin in the Woods and Scream. Some of those, like Scream's a little more subtle, which I like. And I also really like this movie, Welcome to Willits.
I've never heard of that.
I think it's on Netflix, and it's pretty similar to Cabin in the Woods. I think even one of the actors from Cabin in the Woods was in Welcome to Willits. It was pretty good. I think you'd enjoy it. You should check it out. But one thing I liked about Bubba Ho-Tep a lot was that it doesn't really feel like a horror comedy, even though I kind of looked up the movie before we watched it, and I think it's branded like a horror comedy on most sites. But the kind of horror elements seem very understated and almost just seems more supernatural, which I actually liked. Because, like you were saying, horror comedies can be really hit or miss. So, did you feel like this was more horror comedy, or did you think the horror was a little more on the supernatural and fantasy side?
I feel like some of the original horror movies that really came about were involved some of the more classic monsters like the Mummy and the Wolfman, and I think it does definitely touch upon a horror element. And it's funny, so it's a horror comedy to me. It is a little supernatural because there's like spells and all this stuff like that, but I think that is a genuine horror comedy.
It almost reminded me of some of the Abbott and Costello movies, like Abbott and Costello meet like the Wolfman, in the way that it has these two unlikely heroes who kind of bumble their way through most of the movie.
Right.
And even meet the Mummy in
right.
there. So one aspect, though, I thought most of the movie was pretty good, but I felt like it was stronger for the first half, maybe 3/4, and then once it centered more around the Mummy, I felt like it kind of slowed down a bit, and it was still fun and campy, but it just felt a little more straightforward, so I tended to like the comedic parts in the first half, especially Bruce Campbell's dialogue, both his like internal monologue as well as his interactions with JFK.
Yeah. That, like, as you said before, I could not envision anybody else in the role of Elvis Presley or Sebastian Haff other than Bruce Campbell. I think that the comedy really, really touches a nerve with me with this movie. It really, I like, it's just laughs all around, really.
Yeah, when we were watching this, I was just cracking up almost every line that Bruce Campbell utters in this movie. And credit that in part to Campbell for his delivery, but also it was a very well-written movie.
Yes.
And even the plot is very clever, which I liked. But did you feel like the end was as strong as its beginning?
I do not, but I kind of like the way it ended, because spoiler, he dies in the end, but like he kind of dies on his own terms, which I like. I like the way it ended, but I don't think it was as strong as the rest of the movie.
I totally agree with that summary. And I also really appreciated that he dies at the end. Because That was an atypical ending, and all around, Bubba Ho-Tep is just a very unconventional film in terms of its plot, its execution, and even the way that it kills off its protagonist at the end.
Exactly. I think it kills off both of them.
It does. Yeah, it kills
off both of them. Because there's Bruce Campbell and the guy who plays... What's his name? The guy who plays JFK?
That would be Aussie David.
He is also fantastic. And I love the fact when Bruce Campbell comes into his bedroom and there's just newspaper clippings and conspiracy theories about who shot JFK. And he has like dioramas of like how someone would shoot him from that angle and stuff like that. It's just really hilarious.
It was ridiculous, and it's such a detail-oriented movie with the dioramas and the newspaper clippings, and even the two funeral home workers who are always just botching carrying up the caskets.
Yeah,
that I thought was a really nice touch, and kind of served as interludes between different segments of the film.
I always kind of enjoy when there's a running gag throughout the movie. I always enjoy that.
Yeah. No, those a very nice touch. I was just cracking up the whole time. Are there any movies you can think of that are even similar to Bubba Ho-Tep?
It's a very unconventional movie, as you said. I think that Evil Dead 2 kind of plays into that aspect, where you take an old horror element and you kind of add funny to it, but it's a very unconventional movie, and I don't think there's quite anything like it that has been made since or before then.
Yeah, I couldn't really think of any movies, though I tried, and the closest that I could come up with was Evil Dead 2.
Right.
Because the first Evil Dead, it's horror comedy, but the comedy mostly derives from the fact that it was just so low budget.
Right.
Evil Dead 2 was much more intentional comedy, and it was kind of more nuanced, similar to Bubba Ho-Tep, right? It had its slapstick moments too.
With his deliveries, Bruce Campbell with his delivery also made Evil Dead 2.
Oh, easily. Yeah. Because much of that film was just Bruce Campbell basically like alone in a room.
Right.
And I feel like he also makes Bubba Ho-Tep. But, I mean, I thought Aussie Davey as JFK was fantastic as well.
It was kind of like the convalescent home odd couple.
You know, that's a good descriptor for this. So, did you think that the events of this movie were actually occurring, or that it was just kind of two old guys who were losing their shit and Bible narrator kind of scenario?
I think that's I've never really thought about that. The fact that this could not be happening and these two old men could just be going senile. That's a very good point. I always took it for its face value. And I always thought like they were really seeing this. I never really brought into the fact that they may be losing it upstairs. But if you really look at what's going on with the story with him being Elvis Presley and the guy thinking that he's JFK, it's a strong possibility that they were just running around this convalescent home just going senile.
Yeah. So I believe that it was meant to be taken straightforward as this is occurring. But while we were watching it, that was definitely something that kind of crept into the back of my mind of you could view this as they're just going senile, and it was kind of their last hurrah their friends are all dying, and
Right.
they kind of made up this story to go along with that to kind of try and fight death.
Right.
So I think it's kind of a neat interpretation, but I don't think that's what was going on in the film.
I think that's a good way to look at it, Mo. It's good to think about different scenarios with this movie. I didn't even think of that one, Mo.
Yeah, I think it just comes back to how zany this movie is, that it does allow for some creativity just because of how creative it is in and of itself.
Exactly. But then again, the guy that directed this movie always kind of left room for your own theories, especially with movies like The Phantasm and stuff like that. I've not seen the new Phantasm movie, but I know in the original Phantasm they kind of little open-ended for you to what is really going on in this movie, to let you think about what's going on in it. So it wouldn't surprise me if he purposely made it that way.
I do think it was purposefully kind of open-ended. And a lot of my assumption of that, again, derives from what you were saying, the director's past works like Phantasm. And I haven't seen the new Phantasm either, but the earlier ones definitely left a lot open to the imagination. And also had that fantasy vibe.
Yeah.
You know, those were more along the horror lines, but definitely had the fantasy elements going for them.
And John Dies at the End definitely had that fantasy element to it.
I haven't seen that one.
I saw it once. I can't give you details because I don't really remember. It's been so long. But it definitely brought a fantasy element to the movie.
I will have to check that one out. Alright, so with that, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to keep talking about Bubba Ho-Tep.
Excuse me, miss. You gonna throw all that stuff out?
Yeah.
Could I have one of them pictures of Bull? Maybe his Purple Heart? I mean, he was pretty proud of that. Maybe that tin of chocolates there?
I suppose.
The revealing of her panties wasn't intentional or unintentional. She just didn't give a damn. She saw me as so physically and sexually non-threatening, she didn't mind if I got a bird's eye view of her love nest. It was the same to her as a house cat sneaking a peek. I felt my pecker flutter once like a pigeon having a heart attack, and then lay back down and remain limp and still. Of course, these days, even a flutter was kind of reassuring. Thank you. Say, Bull, your kin?
My daddy.
Never seen you here before.
I've only been here once before, when I checked him in.
It was 3 years ago, wasn't it?
You and him friends?
No, he's just roommates. I mean, he never felt good enough to say much. Just hated to see what was left of him go away so easy. Seemed like an all right guy. Mentioned you a lot. You're Callie, right?
Yeah. Well, he was all right.
But not enough so you'd come and see him, though.
Don't lay some guilt trip on me, mister. I did what I could. I mean, if it hadn't been for Medicaid or Medicare, whatever that stuff was, he'd have been in some ditch somewhere. And I sure didn't have the money to take care of him.
My own daughter. Lost long ago to me. If she knew I lived, would she come and see me? Would she even care?
You could have come and seen him. They don't charge you for that.
Mind your own business. I was busy.
Hey guys, we're back and we are talking about Bubba Ho-Tep. So, kind of like we were talking about, Gabe, a lot of the comedy here and what makes this movie so enjoyable is the dialogue. Did you have any favorite lines?
Not in particular. I thought it was all kind of it's like a fantastic book. It just goes so well together.
Yeah. And interestingly, it's actually based off of a book.
It is?
Yeah, it's based off of a novella. So, it was, I think, in the kind of mid-90s that it came out. It was 94, actually. And it was written by Joe R. Lansdale. I'm not familiar with the novella, but reportedly it's the movie follows the novella pretty closely.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know anything else that this author has done.
What's the name? Is the name of the novella just Bubba Ho-Tep, or what is it called?
It is, and it is in the Elvis Presley themed anthology The King is Dead.
The King is Dead?
Yeah. So it's like an alternate history. So based on that, it is supposed to be taken at face value.
Ah.
But I still think the movie was kind of made a little more open-ended, which I liked. But I thought that was actually kind of interesting that this was based off of a book, because until I was doing research for this episode, I didn't realize that. Do you have any favorite or least favorite film adaptations of books?
Oh, man. I'm trying to think. Like, this is a tough one for me. Because I don't... Like, a lot of the books I love aren't made into movies. So, I'll give a really good one that I just saw was Horns, which was written by Joe Hill, and that is actually Stephen King's son.
Did not realize that.
It stars Daniel Radcliffe of Harry Potter fame. It was really well done. I like the book and the movie. I think my least favorite movie made from a book was, and it's still a good movie, was the original It movie. Because Tim Curry just brought that movie to life. Everything else about it was not that fantastic. And also, both of these are good in their own right, but I don't think the movie really does the book justice. Was a book by Stephen King called The Running Man.
Okay. Yeah, the Running Man movie was good, but it was kind of unintentionally cheesy.
Yeah.
And the themes in it are actually pretty thought-provoking.
Yeah.
So I think if it had been made maybe in a different era, maybe with different actors, instead of Arnold Schwarzenegger,
Yeah.
I think it could have been a little bit more powerful than it ended up being.
Right.
So a couple of my favorites, I really liked 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. The book is, of course, fantastic, and I don't know if you've seen the Disney adaptation from the 50s, but I liked what they did there in taking the themes of the novel and kind of updating that, because it had kind of a theme of like nuclear energy in there, and it definitely had this interesting anti-war message in it, which I liked. Blade Runner, of course, Silence of the Lambs, and Hannibal. So Hannibal is actually one of the few films that I can think of where I actually thought the movie was better than the book.
Really?
Yes. Have you read the book? So, I don't want to give away too much about the book, but the end of the movie, I think, is more realistic than the way the book ends. The novel ends on a very strange note that I thought was completely unrealistic and just pole vaulted the shark. It was pretty bad.
Another one of my favorite book adaptations was A Clockwork Orange.
That movie is brutal.
The book is even more brutal.
But, I mean, anything Kubrick touched was just pure gold.
Of course.
And there are a couple that were kind of simultaneous that I like as well. So the book and the movie were made at the same time. Like another Kubrick film, 2001: A Space Odyssey. And one that I really enjoyed the book and the movie of is The Legacy, which had Sam Elliott and Catherine Ross in it. And that had a weird history where the book, the novelization of the movie, ended up coming out before the movie was released in the States because there was some delay with the release, and became a bestseller. And then when the movie came out here, everyone thought that it was based on the book, when in fact the novelization was written at the exact same time as the movie, but that actually helped the movie to have more success that way, which I thought was kind of interesting. I thought The Girl on the Train was really good, and I also really liked Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. I thought those were both good adaptations. So a couple lines that I wanted to point out that I enjoyed a lot were Elvis says, "No offense, Jack, but President Kennedy was a white man." To which JFK responds, "They dyed me this color. That's how clever they are." This was one that I think we both just lost it when they said it, but Elvis goes, "Come on, Marilyn Monroe, how was she in the sack?" And JFK says, "That is classified information, top secret, but between you and me, wow." And then I'd mentioned a few times Bruce Campbell's internal monologues. So there's one part, he's just lying in the in the bed at Shady Rest, and he says, "She saw me as so physically and sexually non-threatening, she didn't mind if I got a bird's eye view of her love nest. It was the same to her as a house cat sneaking a peek. I felt my pecker flutter once, like a pigeon having a heart attack, then lay back down and remain limp and still. Of course, these days, even a flutter was kind of reassuring." And, I mean, Campbell's delivery is just spot on there. But it's very well written.
It is.
When you read that, it's very descriptive. I thought the script was fantastic in this movie. Speaking of Campbell's performance, it would be remiss to review this film without talking about Campbell playing Elvis and playing Sebastian Haff as the Elvis impersonator. That scene was just magical.
It's film gold is what it is.
It is film gold. That was not something that I was expecting when Elvis goes to visit Sebastian Haff. But then as soon as he started opening the door, I immediately knew it was about to happen. Because that's tough to pull off, playing two characters in a movie, especially two talking to one another.
Exactly.
And Campbell just completely nails it.
It's really an interesting scene to see how the two interact with each other, or the one, it's just Bruce Campbell.
Yeah, that was a magical scene. Are there any other films that you can think of that pulled off a similar feat?
The Nutty Professor.
Oh. And you're talking about the clumps with Eddie Murphy.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good example. And I guess to kind of dovetail off that, Coming to America.
Yes.
Yeah, where Eddie Murphy plays like multiple characters. He did that very well. Also, I think Dr. Strangelove did that well.
Have not seen Dr. Strangelove.
Oh. That needs to be corrected. We need to fix this.
It's been a while in our podcast where there's a movie I haven't seen.
Yeah, I know. Usually it's movies that I haven't seen. So I can just start bringing up more that you haven't seen, so we can kind of reverse that.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's a classic. Yeah, I thought that was a good storyline, and again, I think that kind of supports the straightforward storyline. Of course, again, that could have been senile Elvis impersonator having memories that he fabricated.
Yeah.
Of assuming the role of the Elvis impersonator when he was actually Elvis. Yeah. So,
I would have liked to seen a flashback of JFK in a similar aspect. I thought that would have been hilarious.
I think that's one of the few things that this movie's missing, is a flashback of that. And there's even that part where Elvis sees the scar on the back of the neck.
Yeah.
That like could be like a bullet wound. And then JFK starts talking about how they like replaced his brain with sand.
Yeah, he's like, I put a bag of sand in there.
And Elvis starts to say something, and he's just like, fuck it, gonna drop it.
Yeah.
There's nothing logical that can come of this conversation. So we kind of talked a little bit earlier about how it would be tough for anyone to replace Bruce Campbell in this role, but let's do fantasy casting. If you were remaking this movie, who would you cast as Elvis and who would you cast as JFK?
Oh man, that's so tough. That is really, really tough. I might get Morgan Freeman to play JFK.
That's a good choice. That's a very good choice.
Elvis Presley is a tough one. Very tough. Ooh, like... Because a lot of the comedians are not like the comedian... Like, not the kind of comedian that Bruce Campbell is. And that's... There lies the issue within. Bruce Campbell's the only one that could have pulled this off. And I can't think of another person that could have pulled it off as well.
You know who I think could have pulled it off? I don't know necessarily as well, but I think could have pulled it off pretty well. Kurt Russell.
Yeah, Kurt Russell could have done it.
I recently rewatched Big Trouble in Little China. Infinitely watchable. And a lot of his lines in there as Jack Burton, I feel like he could have used that delivery to portray Elvis in this. 'Cause some of the lines he's talking to himself a lot, so I felt like he could have done that well. And interestingly, Kurt Russell played Elvis in a 1970s made-for-TV movie.
Really?
Yes, and it was called Elvis. So that's who I'd pick for Elvis. As JFK, I think Morgan Freeman would be a great choice, but I also think Danny Glover could be good.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, I was thinking of his role as like Murtaugh in the Lethal Weapon movies.
Series, yeah.
You know, because he's always like, I'm getting too old for this shit. Kind of a natural precursor to being in a retirement home.
Exactly. I definitely could have seen that. I just think, like, even Kurt Russell, I think he would have done a good job, but I don't think it really would have held a candle to Bruce Campbell's performance in this movie. And it kind of lets people know, like, Bruce Campbell is actually a very, very good actor.
Oh, he's a fantastic actor. actor. And I don't think he gets the credit for being as talented as he is. Probably because a lot of the works that he's in are very comedic.
Right.
And I guess people just don't recognize his prowess. But it takes a lot of skill to pull off comedy and do it well.
Especially comedy horror. But here's the thing. There's like actors in this world that they'll always be known for something. Like Daniel Radcliffe, he'll always be the Harry Potter kid. And Bruce Campbell will always be the Evil Dead guy. Always. And that's where he kind of gets thrown under the bus when it comes to this. Because people don't realize he can be quite a chameleon sometimes. Sure, he's usually funny, but he can do different types of comedy and not just Evil Dead.
Oh, he can do a lot of different kinds of comedy. Actually, one of my favorite Bruce Campbell roles was this very underappreciated television series in 2000 called Jack of All Trades. And it was set in the 19th century, and he plays Jack, an American secret agent sent there by President Jefferson. And it was this kind of goofy, campy spy show. It only ran for 2 seasons, and it had this like steampunk vibe to it. But I think that's a great example of Bruce Campbell's versatility. Because like you were saying, he tends to be in a lot of these like horror comedy roles, and that was not a horror comedy.
He was also on Bird Notice, which was a good show.
And he was on Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, as well as Xena Warrior Princess. Again, those were kind of roles outside of the horror comedy genre.
He was also in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. Each time is a different role.
Yeah, Raimi just really enjoys working with Campbell. You know how they're just those actor-director combos that tend to happen a lot, like
right.
John Carpenter and Kurt Russell, or Sam Jack and Tarantino. Yeah, Raimi and Campbell. It's one of those powerhouse combos. I thought that was a nice touch having him in the Spider-Man movies, because even though it was like a bit part, it was still kind of fun, especially for fans of Bruce Campbell and of Sam Raimi.
Like, I remember the first one where he played the ring announcer for the wrestling match in the first Spider-Man movie. I thought that was pretty hilarious.
That was fantastic. Did you know that Campbell also had a starring voice role in the 2009 Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs movie?
No. Who did he play in that?
He played... I gotta look this up, because I forgot who he played. But he was actually in it. And that was something I didn't realize until, again, I was doing research for this episode. He was Mayor Shelbourne.
Really?
Yeah, so he co-starred along with Bill Hader, Anna Faris, James Caan, and Andy Samberg. And Mr. T. This is a weird fucking cast. Al Roker's in this movie. Will Forte. Yeah, I don't think we're going to be reviewing that one.
No.
But it just really speaks to Bruce Campbell's acting abilities and his adaptability to star in something like the Evil Dead franchise or an animated kids film or a 19th century action spy comedy. And Bubba Ho-Tep might be my favorite role of his.
It's
actually.
a very good role.
Yeah.
He knocked it out of the park with this one, ladies and gents. This is just... It's Bruce Campbell at his best.
Easily.
Although I am a big fan of him in the Ash versus the Evil Dead series.
That is a very good show. I'm glad you brought that up. It's kind of neat the way it extends the Evil Dead universe. And it kind of strikes a very nice balance between like the first two Evil Dead movies and even the Fede Alvarez remake, because it's a little bit more horror tinged, though it still maintains a lot of the comedy, but it just doesn't feel like it's as slapstick.
Right. And I also like the way they've progressed Ash's character into, instead of like a suave, cunning man, he's just an old pervert now.
Yeah.
Like, there's this one scene, like it's like in the very first episode, where he has replaced his hand with like a piece of wood, like a wooden hand, and he was showing a girl, and he's like, "This is what happens when you save an 8-year-old child from a train tracks." And he's totally lying from getting run over by a train, and she's like, "Oh," like wooed over that. And he's just like an old, nasty pervert now that wears dentures and a girdle. And I love the way they progressed that character.
That was a very nice touch. I was initially skeptical when I found out about Ash vs. Evil Dead, but then from the onset with the first episode, I was immediately sold.
Oh, yeah. It gives you more of a Evil Dead 2 vibe, but there are elements from the first one, and even a little Army of Darkness.
Army of Darkness was an interesting film. I like it a lot, but of the first 3 Evil Dead movies, it's probably my least favorite.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why. I think it's just because of how different it is, and on the one hand, I applaud that it took the trilogy in a new direction, but at the same time, it just felt so much like a drastic departure from the first 2 films that for me, I almost look at it when I'm watching it as like a standalone movie.
Right.
Because I think it could have worked better almost as like the first film, kind of setting up the backstory to what happens in the later films.
Right. Like, I feel it was trying to set these movies up for something even bigger, like something that we could keep on making these movies and have him going on different type adventures to defeat the Deadites. And I think that's kind of what Ash vs. Evil Dead is doing now. They've brought different kind of creatures and characters into it. And I thought that's what they were trying to do with Army of Darkness, but it just did not work out that way.
No. Don't get me wrong, I love Army of Darkness.
Oh, yeah, me too.
I love that whole trilogy. I actually really enjoyed the reboot.
I liked the Fede Alvarez reboot very much. I thought it brought back more of a horror element to the series, but it really goes to say that the fact that they didn't use Ash in that movie let you know that Bruce Campbell is the only one that could play Ash. It's the fact that they didn't pick someone else to play Ash let me know that they did not want to do that, and they just rewrote the story with different characters.
No one could have portrayed Ash.
Right.
That is a sacred character right there.
Yeah, exactly.
That is hallowed ground. You do not tread on that.
It's like Robert Englund and Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, they're just some of those roles that it's tough to get another actor to play.
And they've done it with Freddy Krueger, but it didn't turn out that great.
No, because they didn't have the personality.
Right.
Something like Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees. Exactly. You can get anyone to step in
or Leatherface.
Right.
You can get other people to play those characters. There's not a ton of personality and substance in those characters because they don't speak. Right. But when it comes to Ash and Freddy Krueger and characters like that, and they're so renowned, you cannot have other people playing those characters. And something I've seen recently that still kind of irks me is that they've recast Pinhead in sequel movies.
Yeah. And Pinhead is one of my favorite villains. just because of the way that he's so much more prone to exposition than to actually taking action.
Right.
But that's one of those characters that no one but Doug Bradley
Should do.
can pull that off. Yeah.
Right.
Others have tried, and give them credit. They put a lot of effort into it, but you just can't top Doug Bradley.
No.
And even Doug Bradley in the third one, not through any fault of Bradley's, but I didn't think that Pinhead was very good. That was mostly writing. There were some flaws in there where it seemed like the Cenobite's logic from the first two movies was sort of contradicted in the third one a bit.
Yeah.
So I was not a fan of that one. But Doug Bradley in the first two is pure gold right there.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to keep talking about Bubba Ho-Tep.
That's where they took a piece of my brain. They got it back in D.C. in that goddamn job. I got a little bag of sand up there now.
Jack, no offense, but President Kennedy was a white man.
That's how clever they are. They dyed me this color, all over. Can you think of a better way to hide the truth than that?
Hey, Jack? Jack? Hey, man, you okay? The same hell's that. Mr. Kennedy? Hey, man. You're on the floor.
No shit. Who are you?
Look up. Sebastian. Sebastian Half.
Did you see him go by in the hall? He scuttled like
Who, man?
the one they sent.
Who's they?
Oh, you know who?
No, Jack, I don't. Come on, man.
Lyndon Johnson. Castro, maybe. They sent somebody to finish me off. I think maybe it was Johnson himself. Real ugly. Real goddamn ugly.
Hey, look, man. President Johnson's dead.
Shit. That ain't gonna stop him.
Hey guys, we're back, and we are talking about Bubba Ho-Tep. So, do you have a favorite Bruce Campbell film?
This is probably number 2 on my list. Number 1 would definitely have to be Evil Dead 2. Third Evil Dead, that's pretty much, yeah. That would definitely be my ratings.
Evil Dead 2 is my favorite as well. And Bubba Ho-Tep is a very close second.
Why don't we rate this?
Alright.
This was your pick.
This is
you
my
go first.
pick. And I'm going to give this one a pretty high rating, Mo. I am giving this movie, Bubba Ho-Tep, with Bruce Campbell, a 4.8 out of 5.
And why a 4.8?
I feel like this is a well-written, well-acted, well-cast piece of art. And the only thing I could really want more from it was the JFK, a little bit more on JFK's character. But everything was just was molded so well together. It just flowed so good. I didn't feel like I was watching a movie that was too short or too long. It felt just perfect. So 4.8 I think is a good rating because there was not a lot of things I could pick about this movie, and they gave me a lot of things I wanted from a movie like this.
That's a fair score. I'm gonna go in high, but a little bit lower than that with a 4.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved the acting, especially from Campbell and Davis. I thought it was phenomenally well written, excellent directing. I did, kind of like you said, I wanted a little bit more of the JFK backstory. But I think mostly why my score is a bit lower is it just felt like it lost a bit of its steam once it started concentrating mostly on Bubba Ho-Tep, the mummy. And I kind of preferred the clever dialogue at the beginning instead of when it kind of derailed into this more straightforward action adventure story. It felt like it was a little bit less character driven at that point.
I can see your viewpoint very well. I just have a soft spot for this movie, I guess.
Don't get me wrong, I loved it, and this is absolutely one that I can watch again. It seems like it has a lot of replay value.
All right, so that's our show for tonight. Thanks again for listening. We really appreciate it. Don't forget, head over to the iTunes store, subscribe, leave us a rating.
Please, for God's sake, please stop it. There's no more time. You've got to... Please, stop it. Stop it now. Turn it off. Turn it off. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it.